All right, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday doctoral webinar. Very excited that you're here. Tonight we have um, an awesome speaker. I'm very excited to have you meet Rob. His topic tonight is going to be technology mindfulness. Rob is the CEO of Humans First. And so I'm going to let him continue with moving through the presentation. But if you do have any questions, we will have questions at the end. We've saved about 15 minutes towards the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Rob, it's Krecak, right?
Yeah, very well said, Dan. Perfect pronunciation.
Krecak. I'm passing it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to everyone for coming here today. I'm super grateful to be with you. And like Dan said, we're going to do a half-hour presentation. I'll leave 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm not going to be watching the chat during this, so I'll just look at it at the end. I am super excited to present technology mindfulness to you guys today. Again, my name is Rob Krecak, and I'm the owner and founder of my company, which is called Humans First. Today, we're going to go on a journey together. I'm going to be your guide and show you how you can transform your life into the best version of yourself. And you don't realize it yet, but you're now part of a movement that's going to positively impact the lives of billions of people across the world. So let's get started. So we're actually going to start with a very quick activity. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds. In that 30 seconds, I'd like you to think about or write down the happiest moment of your life. I'll give you just 30 seconds to think about that real quick. When I ask this question to hundreds of people across the world, there's usually two themes that come up. The first one is that our happiest moments revolve around experiences and not material objects. And the second thing is that our happiest moments revolve around other people. They involve other people in our lives. And so we are here to be on this earth to connect with and be with other people. That gives us the most joy and meaning and happiness. And so I want you guys to keep this in mind as we go through the presentation today. I do want you to try to keep an open mind and try to receive this as best as possible. It is possible that today's topics may make you feel anxious or defensive or uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's kind of part of what I'm doing. It's like that on purpose. The other thing is, I have a request for you to put your phone on airplane mode or to put it out of sight, either one. I think you'll get a lot more out of this presentation and be able to be more present. This is a picture of me, little Robbie, when I was in about eighth grade, right before I entered high school. And high school was a very, very difficult time for me personally because I had extremely crippling acne. My self esteem and self worth were very low because of this. And all throughout my life, from age 0 to about 20, I had very high anxiety. So, one of the unfortunate side effects of me having this high anxiety and acne in high school was that I became addicted to video games. Now, this was in the mid 90s before most people even had a cell phone or an internet connected computer or even a computer at all at home. And so I kind of say I was addicted to technology before it was cool to be addicted to technology. But there's other points in my life where I was also addicted to Facebook and email. So this is a very personal topic for me. I've seen the negative repercussions of technology in my own life, and I want to avoid having other people go through what I went through. Now, I want to be super clear. I'm a nerd and I love technology. Built my first computer in middle school. So the message here isn't technology is bad. The message is let's find the right balance of technology use for us that makes our lives better and serves us well. And that's the whole goal for me today is to educate you guys and provide some information and maybe some new awareness that you might not have so that you can decide how using technology best serves you. Another thing that's really interesting about me is that I got diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago, and I'm 40 years old. So for 38 years of my life, I had ADHD and I didn't know it. I also believe I have undiagnosed sensory processing disorder, which is something, about 90% of people who are autistic have sensory processing. It doesn't mean that I'm autistic necessarily, but I share a lot of the same sensory issues that people with autism do. And so, again, I just want to emphasize this is an extremely personal topic for me. And that's how I kind of got involved in this. So, my superpower are two different things. I love analyzing things and I love connecting with people. And that is a very rare pairing. This is a picture of my bookshelf here on the left. Uh, so today's talk is a summation of over 5 years of work in the areas of sociology, psychology, technology, biology, and neurology. And I've read over 100 books and analyzed over 2,000 articles and studies across all those different areas of science in order to be able to share this information with you. When I read that information, I write it down, and I'm actually on my 57th notebook. I write it all down so I can synthesize it and make sense of it. This talk is, again, is a summation of that information today. So imagine a world where you have better test scores and reading comprehension for your students if you're a teacher, or you have enhanced focus and attention in the classroom. You experience less stress, distraction, and exhaustion. You improve your mental health and well being, and you become a better husband and friend, wife, and parent. I truly believe that this information today will help you with all of this stuff on the slide. So, what is the problem? What is the issue here? Why am I talking to you today? Well, in America, and this is, by the way, a statistic from before COVID. So you can't say, oh, COVID negatively impacted this because it's not true. America, the average person spends 3 hours and 46 minutes per day on their smartphone. That's average. If you're a young person, especially under the age of 20, it's probably like 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 hours on average. So that's an awful lot of time. But you might say to yourself, okay, well, that's a decent chunk of time, but we still have 20 hours in a day about other than that. So that's not too bad. So the real issue with this is in the United States, on average, we spend 12 hours and 21 minutes a day in front of all screens and media. Said another way, we spend 75% of our waking lives in front of screens and media. This, by the way, is a statistic from Nielsen, who's been measuring this for 50 years. So it's very reliable. The problem with all this technology use is this: think of humans as a very advanced animal. We're just really smart animals at the end of the day. And any animal has to really do two things: it has to survive and it has to reproduce. Everything that we do over the long term helps us survive or reproduce. And screens are not something that's natural in nature, they don't exist. And so they don't inherently help us survive or reproduce. And so it's not surprising that if we spend 3 quarters of our lives doing something that isn't natural and doesn't help us in the long term, it's probably going to have some effects that we don't even realize. And so my thesis is this: technology is affecting our mental health, our relationships, and our productivity at work every minute of every day, all the time. And again, I'm not here to say that technology is bad, but I want to help you become aware of some of the ways that your technology use might not be serving you well. And then you can decide if you want to change your behavior or not. So the thing is, humans are not first in our world anymore. Technology is, because we spend 75% of our lives with it. Interestingly, when we were cavemen and cavewomen 50,000 years ago, we spent 90% of our time with other people socializing. Now we almost spend 90% of our time with technology. It's amazing how our worlds have flipped and changed. And we weren't meant to live this way. It's not how we're designed to live. Throughout history, many things have happened to humanity that have resulted in unintended consequences. It's really hard to see these consequences until after they have happened. I'm here to help you see the future and understand these consequences as they take place, not afterward. I'm actually here to help you see the future now. So here's what happens. This is so important. This is really, really critical. This is the most important slide in the whole deck. Nearly every time we interact with our technology or get a notification, when we check our email, when we check our Slack, when we're on social media, when we play video games, it activates our sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight or flight system that keeps us alive, like the red bird here on the left. So we check our email, our fight or flight system gets activated. Here's what happens when that happens: blood shunts away from our critical organs and goes to our legs and our arms to get us again into a situation where we can flee or fight. It also increases our heart rate. It dilates certain blood vessels in some areas of our body and shrinks blood vessels in other areas of our body. It puts us on very, very high alert. We're hyper vigilant. And this is not bad in very limited amounts of time and very limited circumstances when we need to get out of a threatening situation. For instance, when we were cavemen and cavewomen, if a saber-tooth tiger attacked your family, you get into this fight or flight mode because you need to save your family. It's a survival mechanism. Here's the problem. The system that offsets our fight or flight is our rest and digest system, like the yellow bird on the right. And so they're a balance. They try to balance each other out. Well, when our fight or flight system is always activated, and it takes a minimum of 30 minutes for our rest and digest system to counteract that, and we're using our technology all day, every day, what's happening is our fight or flight system is constantly turned on, and our rest and digest system never has a chance to turn on and catch up and balance us out. And so, this is why we are going around and we're stressed out all the time and we're really anxious and nervous. It's because our fight or flight system is constantly being triggered by technology use all the time, all day, every day. And here's the problem with that. When our fight or flight system is activated all the time, it releases a bunch of chemicals, but two of them are adrenaline and cortisol. In large amounts, adrenaline and cortisol affect every single or almost every tissue in the body. And so it has a host of other implications for us, not only for our body, but they also affect our mind. And so this is the reason why our anxiety as a society has increased and our fear has increased. It's because we're always in fight or flight all the time. And the craziest thing is all of this is happening, this activation of your fight or flight system, it's all happening subconsciously without your awareness. You have no idea that it's happening most likely, and it's happening all the time. The average person when they're at their job, if they have a white collar job, they check their email once every 6 minutes. So basically, like you're activating your fight or flight system every 6 minutes. Here's another intended consequence of this fight or flight system. When we activate this fight or flight system, it becomes more sensitive. And as it becomes more sensitive, it gets set off more easily. So we use our technology, we get into fight or flight, our fight or flight system becomes more sensitive. It's triggered more easily the next time we use technology. We get more nervous and more anxious and more stressed. And so then the system becomes more sensitive and the spiral continues. And so the way that we can interrupt this is to break the cycle and break the system and do something differently and become aware of the ways that the technology is activating our fight or flight system. Sleep is one of the most important bodily functions that we have because it helps us repair our body and mind. What happens when we sleep is there's this increase in cerebral spinal fluid in your brain. And the fluid comes in and basically washes away all the waste products from the day. Think of it like a washing machine, but for your brain. That's what happens at nighttime. Well, when you use your technology very close to the time you go to bed, it activates this fight or flight system. Then what happens is you have delayed sleep onset, meaning that you go to bed later than you would have anticipated, and your sleep quality is way worse. Again, this happens without you even realizing it. So you, for instance, check your, and I did this all the time, right? I used to do this all the time. You check your email right before you go to bed. So let's say, for instance, you check your email, you get a really angry email from your boss. Well, you're not going to respond because A, that shows your boss that you're available at night and looking at your email. And B, you're probably not going to say something very constructive in that moment. So now you're in this amped up fight or flight state before bed. You're really stressed out. You're, of course, going to go to bed way later and your sleep is going to be way worse. And so, what that does is when your sleep is poor, it crushes your entire next day. Your entire next day is going to be bad simply because of that one email that you read from your boss. And so you can decide whether it makes sense for you to check your email before bed. But to me, it doesn't really seem to make sense if I'm going to be put in this fight or flight mode and make my sleep much worse. Um, by the way, if you have teenagers, a meta-analysis of 20 studies showed that the consistent evidence of bedtime access to use of electronic devices and reduced sleep quality and quantity. So there's now 20 studies that show that this is happening to not just children, but adults as well on a grand scale. Digital communication is one of the things that helps us function, and it does for sure improve our lives in some ways and allow us to communicate and makes things go faster, there's no question that it's very helpful. But one of the unintended consequences is that it fosters a lack of empathy online. So, for instance, let's say I say something really nasty to my aunt when I on her Facebook page. Well, I don't see the anger or disgust or hatred or any of those emotions when my aunt reads that comment on Facebook. And so, because I don't see the look on her face, there's a huge lack of empathy in that situation. And all this digital communication fosters a greater lack of empathy in our society. This is one of the reasons why we have online bullying, because the bullies don't see how much it negatively impacts the ones being bullied. And this just isn't on social media, it's literally on every digital form of communication. It's on email, Slack, text messages, all of those are susceptible to this. So what happens is we interpret digital communication more negatively than non-digital communication because we're hardwired for a negativity bias as humans as a survival mechanism. So essentially what's happening is the more our society communicates digitally, the more negative our society becomes. And so one of the things that I think is helpful to think about is when you're delivering very personal or very critical information to people, is there a way that you could deliver it not in a digital format, ideally like person face to face, if not maybe over the phone or a Zoom call, that would be probably much more effective and much more human and empathetic than delivering it via email or a text message. So this is my grandma here on the left, and my sister and my brother-in-law who got married. And during COVID, I spoke with my grandma a lot on the phone, but after COVID was kind of over, I saw her in person for the first time. And the very first thing she told me is, "Come here and give me a hug, Rob." And I thought about that. I'm like, wow, that's sort of weird, right? That my grandma, I mean, the very first thing she said is not weird, but it's just like, oh, what's going on there? And what happens is when we are in person with other people, we release serotonin and oxytocin when we have human connection with them, when we hug them or when we're in person. There's so much serotonin and oxytocin that are released, and that makes us feel loved and cared for and needed and supported. And when we use digital communication, the amount of serotonin and oxytocin released are much lower or sometimes non-existent. And so this is why everyone feels lonely now. All of our communication is going digital, and we are experiencing less serotonin and oxytocin because of that. We feel less support and love for ourselves or from other people, and we feel lonely. And so again, I'm not saying you shouldn't communicate digitally. That's silly. Of course you should. There's a lot of things that that's beneficial for, but sometimes seeing someone in person and doing something in person is way more meaningful. So for instance, me giving my grandma a hug and saying I love you grandma in person is much differently psychologically than me sending my grandma a text message that says I love you grandma. I know that this is gonna be something that maybe some of you don't like to hear, but I really believe that social media is the new cigarette. There's no question. And here's the thing: the social media companies don't want you to believe this. They have a vested interest in making you not believe that social media is bad for you. But this quote is a summation of a bunch of studies about social media, specific mostly Facebook and Instagram. And here's kind of the conclusions from these studies. The use of social media may detract from face to face relationships, reduce investment in meaningful activities, increase sedentary behavior through more screen time, lead to internet addiction, and erode self esteem through unfavorable social comparison. I actually think that that sounds way worse than cigarettes personally, but you guys have to decide if social media is something you want in your life. One of the things that I highly recommend, very highly recommend watching the movie The Social Dilemma on Netflix, especially if you have a family like teenagers who use social media a lot. It will absolutely illuminate what is happening to not just your family, but really the entire world when they're using social media. Does social media have good points? Yes, it does. It can be used for business purposes. It can be used to contact people. But here's the thing, you probably don't need to be using it as much as you are. The average person in America, by the way, uses it 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. And here's the other thing is you can probably use it from your computer just the same way as you can on your phone. It's just a lot less convenient and it's more distracting on your phone. So my personal solution has been that I delete all the social media from my phone and I just access it from a laptop or computer. Or another solution, if you don't want to completely delete it from your phone, is you can move the apps to the very last page of all your apps. So it's on purpose more difficult to access, and that should allow you to use it a lot less. What the one thing that I think is sad about what's happening to society is we just don't feel as strongly connected with people. And that's really, again, one of the reasons why I named my company Humans First is we're really here to connect with and be with other people. And I wish I could, by the way, give you this presentation in person, right? I know I can't do that, but absolutely would love to if I could. The reason is if you have a close personal relationship with someone, the sense of closeness between two people will drop by 80% when the people haven't seen each other in person after 5 months. So, what that really means is that if you want to have a close personal connection with someone, you do have to see them in person about once every 3 months or more frequently. And I get that that's hard. I get that that's a huge ask for, especially if you have kids and you have a lot going on. But that's just what the reality of the situation is. If I had to summarize this entire topic in 4 words, it's software is eating humanity. That's simply what it is. I believe that we can find a better balance for ourselves. It doesn't mean that we have to eliminate technology or that it's bad. It just means that we've eclipsed the point where the balance is good for us. A lot of us are out of balance related to technology mindfulness and our technology use. And that balance is not sustainable over a long period of time. It's causing us to be sick. It's causing us to have bad mental health and bad relationships and poor productivity. And so you can decide what's best for you, right? Like I have certain things that I do, but you have to decide what makes sense for you. Human time and attention is now the most valuable commodity on the planet. It's way more valuable than anything else. And so what that means then is your full attention and complete presence is the ultimate gift in today's world. I'm going to show you 3 quick things that you can do today to change your technology use and get a bunch of time back, as well as just improve your mental health, relationships, and productivity. Um, Normally, if I had more than half an hour, we'd actually do them on the call, but we're not going to be able to actually do them. But I'm just going to provide these for you guys so you can know what they are. The first one is to disable almost all notifications. This is something that 85% of people have not done. They've not adjusted the notifications on their phone. Now, I personally have decided to disable all notifications except for phone calls, text messages, and travel applications. Anything else, I've completely disabled. The second one is disabling raise to wake. If you have an iPhone, you can just go into settings and search for raise to wake. If you have an Android, you can go into settings and search for always on display. It's the same thing. It's just titled differently in Android. Just disabling this one setting for me saved me about 2 hours of screen time per week or about 100 hours a year, that's 2.5 work weeks, 2.5 work weeks of time from one setting. So basically, if you disable it, what the implication is that your phone screen will no longer turn on when you physically move your phone. You have to double tap the display or hit the power button to turn it on. The other thing that it does for you is saves your battery life. So you get a double benefit there. And the last one is to reduce social media and news consumption. Again, one of the options here is to delete it from your phone. Another option is to move it to the very last page of your apps. Another thing you can do is you can make it so that every single time you need to enter your password and make it a really long and annoying password so that you're highly deterred from using it on your phone. That's another third option. I truly believe that the world would be a better place if we didn't. I'm not saying if we eliminated these things, but didn't use them as much. We don't need to be on social media for 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. So it's obvious that humans were designed to connect with the hearts and souls of other people on this planet. And my vision for Humans First isn't that this is isn't that it's just a company, but Humans First is a social movement. It's something that we can all get behind to make the world a better place. And something my wife and I recently realized that we wanted to share with people is The amount of love, success, and happiness in this world are infinite. And so imagine how much love, success, and happiness we could all have together if we all decided to put humans first. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to chat with you guys. I finished in under 30 minutes. If you want to chat about this some more personally, please reach out to me. We can set up a time to discuss this. I'm happy to do like a consultation with you at no charge. It's just something that I'm really passionate about and I really think that the world needs.
I want to thank you very much, Rob, for coming here, today. This was a great insight. I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old,
Mm,
they just turned 13 yesterday, and
nice.
all they do is they play video games, which is fine. But then they're on Facebook or they're doing all this garbage, right? And they just sit there and just flip, 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 flip. It's hard for them to break away from that social convention now that they've been ingrained in it. So I think
Yeah.
the three tips that you provided, I think will work really well with this. I'm gonna do it when we get off this call.
Nice. I'm so glad to hear that, Dan. I'm super grateful to hear that. And that's really ultimately my goal is I just want people to take this information and change their behavior, right? And maybe even if you even just do one small thing and you have better technology mindfulness after my presentation, like in my mind, that's a huge win. That's me working toward us being more human and connecting with each other. And that's really what I want from this. So like that to me is an awesome win. And I really like to hear that.
So many of our jobs are tied to our phones. There's such a demand to always be available. Any recommendations on additional strategies to disconnect?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a huge and a large part in my, of technology mindfulness is establishing clear expectations and communication boundaries. And this is something that virtually no organizations do. Um, here's what I recommend is when I start working with an organization, I have them establish standards of communications and communication guidelines. It's an actual written document. And it reads something like this. Our business hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We do not expect you to answer business communications outside of those hours. When you are in those hours, we will use email as the primary method of communication. We expect that email will be checked 2 times a day during business. If there's something that's more urgent than that, we expect you to use, let's say, a Slack message. And if there's something and Slacks is expected to be checked once every 3 hours, 3 business hours. And if there's something that's urgent, we anticipate that you would use a Slack phone call and those will be returned as immediately as possible. So and again, like the numbers there and the standards can be obviously adjusted to whatever makes sense for your organization. But the point is then you delineate that in a document and send that out to the staff and then everyone agrees on it. So then when you get the email at 9 at night, you don't feel obligated to answer because you know that the expectation is that you check your email twice a day. And so you basically have like 24 hours to get back to people. So once everyone has the same standard, it's all very clearly, all the expectations are very clearly stated, then people can give themselves the permission to not have to check their email all the time. But in my opinion, it does have to come from leadership, and leadership has to truly embrace that.
Agree. Thank you for that. Thank you for the informative presentation. However, as someone who works in the technology field and earns a living from it, I cannot say that technology is completely ineffective. After all, this presentation is being made through technology. Yeah, touche.
Of
Right.
course.
That being said, it's difficult to determine the appropriate level of technology usage where it can simplify the life and provide meaningful opportunities while avoiding a negative impact on individuals. There are countless applications that focus solely on empowering individuals, which can increase egoism amongst people. This trend, whether we like it or not, is causing problems for humanity. And
Mm.
the curious, we can promote a more constructive approach to technology usage through family and social and school education. Is it possible to change the current mindset in this way?
Love your comments and your observations. And thank you for that. That's super interesting and helpful. The answer is yes. Like I was telling Dan, I literally just came from a presentation at a school district where I was talking to students or the excuse me, the teachers and administration of an elementary school, and I was hearing things. Kids as young as kindergarten are being affected by this stuff now. Kindergarten, and it's a lot. Not like one kid, a lot. And so I absolutely believe that this does start with it's not only at school, but really what I'm also trying to do is get this information to parents because there's only so many things that the teachers can do at school. Obviously, the parents have to be on board in order for this to truly be effective. So, I mean, I'm absolutely in agreement with you that this really can start in school, and that's a huge component of this. If you guys have any other ways that, or any other connections for me where I could be connected with people, for literally again as early as elementary school, but all the way up through high school or in college, other colleges or universities, I would love to get a hold of them or get in contact with them, and that would be a huge help to me. I'd love to talk to them.
Right. Let's jump down. I know we only have a couple more minutes here and you have a hard stop. So, have you seen any research regarding the impact of screen exposure to early childhood development? So many digital learning educational tools are used in lieu of traditional analog or human engagement methods.
Yeah. And this is very difficult to prove, and it would be detrimental to the tech industry if it did. So that's why there's not a lot of clear science on this because, again, it would really impact technology company values. But basically, here's what happens when we're born, we have 3 times the amount of brain connections than when we're an adult. As we get older, those brain connections get pruned away to save energy and to make our brain more efficient. Well, what happens is when you expose a kid to screens, especially before the age of 5, it's a stimulus that is 3 different things. It's bright, it's loud, it's moving. Well, in nature, when we're cavemen and cavewomen, the 3 types of stimuli that we pay most attention to are bright, loud, and moving stimuli because they're the most threatening, things that can kill us. And so when you're very young and you're exposed to a bright, loud, and moving stimuli, it's telling your brain, "Hey, you should be paying attention to this stimulus because it's a potential threat." And so it literally changes your brain development or the brain development of that child and tells them to pay attention to those stimuli in the future. What then happens, or what is theorized, is this is how some possibility that this is contributing to autism because if your brain is being told, hey, pay attention to this two-dimensional, non-natural stimuli, it's also then being told, don't pay as much attention to the 3D stimuli of reading other people's faces and emotions. And so there is a link between technology use and autism, and that's the brain science behind what we think is happening. Again, very difficult to prove, but it seems very possible in my mind.
Well, we're about out of time here. So, I want to thank Rob for jumping on here tonight. And I want to thank everyone else for being here. This was a great webinar. And we will talk with you soon. Okay.
Thank you guys so much. Grateful for the opportunity. Let me know if you'd like to connect and chat. So thank you again.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Bye bye.